Welcome back to another video. We've got factorizing on today. Before we do a joke, do you guys want to hear a joke? I normally charge for these, but do you want to hear a joke about a roof? Don't worry, this one's on the house. All right, if you didn't laugh, go do push-ups. So today is talking about factorizing. It's the opposite of expanding. So hopefully you've done your expansions, and now we're talking about factorizing. Yeah, basically the idea is we take a factor, we take it outside of a bracket, and then we kind of reintroduce brackets in. It's usually very useful for simplifying and graphing. I'll get to graphing later. We're not going to worry about that for now, but for simplifying algebraic expressions, and even for solving some algebraic equations later on, we'll use these. Now, it's going to be, there's four main methods, and I'm going to hopefully do a bit of an example of each. So the first one is probably the easiest way, or the most common, is we wanted to find the highest common factor. Sometimes we call it a HCF. Ideally, it's just a number that divides into another nicely. So what I mean by that is no remainder. Okay. So the highest common factor is the highest number. Okay. So not just any number, but the highest one. Now, if I'm looking at this one, 4x squared plus 16x, what I'm going to take a look at here is between these two terms, my highest common factor, I'll write this down. So I can see between the numbers, I can see that 2 will go into both, but the highest common factor here will actually be 4, because 4 can go into 4 and 4 can go into 16. And then if I look amongst the letters, I have an x squared and an x. So at least my highest common factor here will be 4x. So I'm going to take 4x outside of a bracket. And at this point here, it's kind of about compensating. So I'm trying to figure out 4x times what gives me 4x squared. I can see that I'm missing an x. And then it's plus here, 4x times what gives me 16x is just going to be 4. Okay, and that there would be my answer. I've taken out the common factor, and there's my answer. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next type. Now, if we have a difference of 2 squares, this is kind of going off one of your special expansions. If we have x minus y, x plus y, it just becomes x squared minus y squared. A difference of 2 squares, difference is just a fancy way to say minus. And squares is just any kind of square number. So I've got x squared and y squared here, but I'll show you later. It kind of works with these. If you take a look at these, all of these are actually squares. 9 is a squared, 64 is a squared. So the way that this would work is if I've got a squared minus another squared, I can see here that x squared is a square, 9 is a square, so it's just going to be x minus 3, x plus 3, and that will be your factorization. Okay, so whenever there's 2 terms and they're both squared and one is minus the other, you can use this factorizing method called difference of 2 squares. So x squared minus 64, I can see here that my 2 squares or squared numbers are x and 8. And so one would be plus, one would be minus. If you're unsure about these, expand them out and just make sure you do get them. Okay, now this one, it starts to get a little bit different because now we've got not just an x squared, but 4x squared. I need to figure out what the square of this would, or the square root of that would be. In this case, it's going to be 2x. I'm going to have 2x minus y, 2x plus y, because 2x squared is 4x squared. Okay. And for this last one here, I'm looking 5 is not a square, and 40 minus 45 is also not a square. So what I'm going to do is, I noticed that 5 and 45 are a common factor, so I'm going to take that out first using technique number 1. Now, if I take out 5 and I factorize that first, I'm going to be left with x squared minus 9. Now, notice this is a difference of 2 squares. So I know this is just going to be 5 bracket, and I can see the 2 squares, it will be x minus 3, x plus 3, and that would be fully factorized. Okay. Now, again, beauty of video is if you don't get it, pause it, rewind it, see if you can figure out what I've done. I'm going to continue moving on. Now, another method is if you group in pairs. So sometimes you'll get terms that you need to factorize that have 4 terms, okay? This is probably your biggest hint. It doesn't always work this way, but it often does. Now, it makes sense if we're grouping in pairs that we're just going to look at 2 bits at a time. I'm going to factorize kind of 2 sections at a time and hope that something common comes out of them. So if I'm looking at 12xy and 9x, I can see here that my highest common factor is going to be, I can see 3 will go into 12 and 9. And then between the two of them, the letters, I can see that the x is common. So I can see there's the 3x here. Now, if I'm looking at the other one, I'm looking at the 2 numbers. I've got 16 and 12. I'm going to say probably, I'm going to take out maybe -4 because there's a negative here. So you have to do a little bit of experimenting. I can see that -4 is going to be a common factor because that -4 can go into 16 and it can go into 12. So let's do this. We've got 3x for the first 2 terms. And then all I need to do is compensate. What do I need to multiply 3x by to give me 12xy? I can see that 3 needs to multiply by 4 to give me 12. And then I'm missing 1y, so I just put that in, so 4y. And then I'll have, what do I need to get from 3x to 9x? It's going to be, or negative 9x, it's going to be -3. Okay, now the second term, I'm going to have a -4 because we said that was what the highest common factor was for the second 2, the second group. And then from there, I'm going to put a bracket and I can see -4 times +4 gives me -16, right? And then I'm also missing a y, and then -4 times -3 will give me +12. Now, when you do this in pairs, what you should notice is that whatever you've put in your brackets, they should end up the same. If they don't end up the same, you haven't quite done it right. So what happens now is once you've kind of got it into kind of like you factorize it at this stage, to fully factorize it, I would have to go 4y -3. So the common bracket goes in one bracket together, and then the rest of the terms will go in the other bracket. So in this case, it's going to be the 3x and the -4. And that there will be your fully factorized version. Okay. Just for one more time, I'm going to speed through this one. I'm looking between these 2 terms. Highest common factor of this will be 2x squared. For these 2, I can see my highest common factor is going to be, I'm going to take out the minus as well. -3, that's it. -3 can go into 3 and 24. So again, I'm going to write 2x squared bracket. I'm left with x, I'm pretty sure +8. Yeah. And then I've got the -3 as the next common factor, the second pair, and it's going to leave me with x +8 to give me 3x +24. Then from here, I can see my x +8 are common. So x +8 is one bracket. The other bracket will be 2x squared -3. And there's that. All right, last one, quadratics. This might take the longest. So we've got these quadratics. It just means, it's a fancy way to say it's a parabola or it's some sort of kind of arch. It'll look like this if you remember from last year. But the main idea of this is you'll often have this thing called a trinomial where there's 3 terms. There's a squared term, just a single x term, and a constant term. Okay, and monic just means that there's no number in front of the x. These ones are infinitely easier. So the way that I like to factorize this is what we call PSF, product sum factors. So in other words, I'm trying to find the product, 2 things that will product to give me 12, 2 things that will sum to give me 7. So I'll write this down, product sum factor. I'll move it over a bit. So the product here, normally what you do is you multiply the number at the front with the number at the end, the constant. So this one here is just going to be 1 times 12. Product's going to be 12. My sum needs to be 7. This is where you kind of have to do a bit of thinking. What 2 numbers, or for factors, what 2 numbers will multiply to give me 12, but add to give me 7? And so for me, I know it's going to be 4 and 3, because if you multiply those together, you'll get 12. If you add them together, you'll get 7. So in this case here, your factorization here would be x plus 4, x plus 3, and you can break them up into those 2 different brackets. Okay. For the next one, we'll do PSF again. Product is going to be, in this case, -12. The sum is going to be 4. And I've got to think what two numbers will multiply to give me -12, but add to give me 4. I can see it's going to be 6 and -2. Okay. So in this case, it's just going to be x plus 6 and x take away 2. All right, and the last one here, I'm going to do it without doing the PSF. You can continue on that process, but I can see here that it will be 6 and 3. So it'll be x minus 6, x minus 3, because -6 times -3 gives you positive 18, which is what I want. But then -6 plus -3 will give me -9. So just be careful with your negatives there. All right, and the non-monic, this is probably going to be the one that is probably the most time consuming. We are going to use the PSF method again. The only difference now is because these are non-monic, I have a number at the front that I need to multiply with the number at the end. So in this case, our product is 2 times 12, which is 24. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to give you 12, and then your sum is always just going to be a middle term again. I want to find two numbers that will multiply to give me 24, but add to give me 11. So I can see here it'll be 8 and 3. So this is where it gets a bit weird, because I'm going to break up this 11x into two different terms. I'm going to write this as 2x squared, and then I'm going to write plus 8x plus 3x plus 12. So it's just kind of like helping me to unravel it a little bit. And at this point, we've got 4 terms. So that means we go straight back to factorizing by groupings. So I might actually get rid of this guy. You can do that one in your own time. And so for here, we've got, I'm going to take 2x out as a common factor. I can see it'll be x plus 4 for the first two terms. And for here, the common factor I can see between 3x and 12 will be 3. Okay, and that's going to leave me with x plus 4. And I can see here I've got something common. It's just going to equal to x plus 4 in one bracket. And your other bracket will be 2x plus 3. And that will be your factorization. Okay, hopefully you guys were able to keep up with that. If not, pause the video, go back, and make sure you try to do your best to understand every point. All right, all the best. I'll catch you guys later. All right, bye-bye.